So if you have your students who are struggling with reading, hopefully this will help them to love and fall in love with reading more. So I'm a book lover, and I love a good book, and I love good book recommendations. Always ask people for book recommendations. And I also love and enjoy listening to audiobooks. And I thought when I started teaching 7 years ago, that by asking students about their favorite books, that would be a nice way to break the ice and find something to talk about. Maybe they tell me about a book that I've never read before, but then I would almost always get the answer of I don't like reading, or I don't read books. Almost the percentage of the students saying that kept rising throughout the years. And so I started asking them, why don't you like to read? Why you don't enjoy reading? And it came down to these reasons here. So the first reason is no time for reading. So not just the students, but all of us don't have time to read. Life is busy and fast. And students find it not relaxing, or something that they can fill out their spare time with is reading. And for adults, for us, maybe that's why people love to audiobooks, because you can put it on while you're doing something else, or while you're driving, or you're doing something around the house. So there's not much time for reading. Reading is hard, and that is an obvious reason, of course, because if you have students who don't like to read, struggle with reading, get lost in the words, if they have a long comprehension, reading comprehension, of course, reading for them is hard. This third reason, I think, is the most important out of them all, because movies and TV series replace books, because nowadays almost all the books are adapted into movies and TV series. And we have the platform for that, Netflix, Amazon Prime, and all these things. So it's much easier for students, and sometimes for us, just to watch the film or the TV series instead of reading a 300-page book. So movies and TV series is easier way to know the story of a good book. Some books for them are expensive. And the last reason, I don't know what to read. And I think this reason has to come with a solution, us as a teachers, to help students. Because if you have a struggling students who want to start reading but don't know how, because they're not interested in a particular genre of books, maybe, so they will be lost. They don't know where to begin, where to start reading. So now we've known the reason why students don't like to read, but how can audiobooks help students? Why is it effective? So it helps students to capture students' attention. Having them to listen what they are reading is definitely a good way to lock their attention and hold it for a little bit longer. But if you have students who get lost in words and just cannot concentrate and cannot get the gist of what they're reading, so listening to something and reading it at the same time lock their attention for a bit. It modeled good interpretive reading, teaches critical listening, which is important for students, highlight the humor in books. And I think it's important, if you want students to love books, if they listen to an audiobook whilst they're reading, they will definitely see the humor in the book, and maybe they would want to go back and read it, or if it's a short story or a long reading text. Also, if it has like a thrill in it, definitely students would want to complete the book or the text that they have. Introduce new vocabulary or difficult proper names or locals. Good for those lower level students, intermediate, pre-intermediate and elementary. Sidestep unfamiliar dialects or accents, Old English and old-fashioned literary styles. And the last thing, it provides a read aloud model. Okay, so how can we implement it in class? We can do it, we can adapt it whichever way you like. It depends on your students' abilities, their interests. If you have a mixed class ability, if you have advanced, if you have lower level students, For example, we can use it during a lead-in stage. So let's say you have a past simple tense lesson. You can definitely bring a small part of a short story or of a novel or a book that you think will suit the students' interests, play it while they read, follow it up by follow-up questions, and that could be your context of your lesson. You can use it with writing activities. So let's say you're teaching narrative tenses, would be perfect for it. You can bring, again, a short story. I think short stories works really well with these kind of activities. You can ask students to write the ending, group them in groups, write a different ending or an ending that they don't know about of the story. So they play part of the story and then they write the ending of it. And then they share and see how different each group can write an ending of a story. And then they can compare it to the actual ending of the story. And you can create competition with the students, and competition works well with the students in any activities that I find. So it's an interesting way. I've tried actually this in a creative lesson class I was assisting, and we played like an introduction or a very first part of a short story called Memento. And the purpose of the lesson was for them to write movie scenes. So we asked them to write in groups a movie scene of what they've heard and read, and it was really interesting. Last thing is to create a play or a role play and sketch after they listen and they perform it to the class. So how can we do that? Creating role play or sketch. So this activity could be adapted to any level. As I said, using audiobooks is adaptable to any level. So I find that using short stories are the best during classes. So let's say that you're going to use The Telltale Heart by Edgar Allan Poe. It's one of my absolute favorite short stories. And this would suit advanced level. So it's a very famous one. You can find the audiobook online. But if you choose a short story or a novel or any kind of book that you can't find, it's the audiobook, the audio, you can go ahead and record it yourself, and it'd be really interesting for your students. Sometimes I do that. So The Telltale Heart is a famous short story, but those who don't know what is it about, it's by Edgar Allan Poe. As I said, it's about an unnamed character who is trying to prove his sanity in spite of killing an old man because of his vulture eye. So if you want to try and do this activity in class, first off, you bring part of the audiobook. Let's say not a long recording, because your students will get lost in the middle, but just a small part. You have the students, as you see, attentively listening while reading, and then you stop at a particular stage or point in the text in the short story where you think is interesting. The students can start writing after it or can create a role play. And what's good about this short story is that it's very descriptive, so it's really good for students to create a role play from it. So in this case, we have here, like, we stopped when this unnamed character was visited by 3 policemen. So you have 4 characters for the students to write a role play about. And then when they're done listening and reading, you can group them into groups of 4, because we have 4 characters. And then they can create this role play, they write it. And then again, you have a competition to vote which performance was the best. Maybe you have a panel of 3 students who would judge the performance. It would be a really fun way for the students. And maybe they would want to continue reading the short story after finishing class to see what happened next. So this is, this is the steps that I've just mentioned in the previous slide. And I forgot to mention that if you have a mixed abilities class, while they're listening, I suggest pausing the audio several times and ask students follow-up questions just to make sure that they understand what's happening in the story. So I hope you try this in your classes, and hopefully it will make your classes more interesting, fun for the students, and also encourage them to read. Yeah, so thank you.
Thank you very much, Mahinour, for these very creative and engaging ideas to work with audiobooks.
Thank you.
I personally love the idea of working with Edgar Allan Poe in class, because it's not something that students are usually familiar with, but they love watching horror films, and of course they would love reading Edgar Allan Poe stories. Very good.
Yes.
So we have 3 questions. I'm going to try to ask them so we don't get much time. So the first question is, do you find that students nowadays don't have the attention span to sit and read?
Definitely, yes. I think my students, throughout the years, they don't focus on the task at hand or the reading that they have. Maybe because they just get daydreaming, or they sleep sometimes. If they have a long reading text, they might fall asleep. So I think that's why having an audiobook, having something to listen to, and reading at the same time what they're listening, maybe just hold their attention a little bit longer. Because if they don't get every word of the reading that they have, or they're lost, having a voice, and it gives them more imagination, broadens their mind. So listening, reading, maybe the intonation, the voice, the atmosphere of the audio would just let them understand a little bit more. So yes.
Fantastic. Yeah, thank you. I don't know if you have mentioned, but do you work with teenagers, adults, or children?
Young adults, so 19.
Young adults.
Yeah.
And may I ask you where you find the audiobooks?
You can find it on YouTube. There's another app called, I don't remember its name, but there's other apps for audiobooks. These kinds of stories, Edgar Allan Poe, Shakespeare, and other books like Jane Eyre and Jane Austen's books are available. But again, if you can't find, and you find something interesting, you can record it yourself. And it would be really interesting for students to listen to your voice recording something different, see the teacher in a different way than just giving instruction. So yeah, I think it's interesting.
Perfect. Yes, Erin is mentioning Oxford Bookshelf and Amazon too. So yeah, thank you very much, Erin. Yes,
there's Audible, also Audible, but it's with a subscription. There is another app called Castbox. It has also audiobooks and podcasts. If you can use a podcast, it would be interesting and nice for the students.
Lovely, thank you. One last question then. What level would you start introducing the authentic versions, and how would you adapt?
I think starting from intermediate or lower than that, you can find children's stories for lower levels. It would definitely help them. You can adapt it if you feel like the material that you have doesn't suit, or it's a bit difficult for the students. You can definitely adapt it if there's any culture sensitivities or anything. You can adapt it.